And welcome to it. Thanks for being with us here On Deck, a special edition of On Deck for a couple of reasons. The most important one, it is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all of the moms out there. And also, we are reliving in just a few minutes one of my all-time favorite Orioles games. And you're probably saying to yourself, Brett, you say that a lot. Well, I have a lot of favorite games. And I didn't know I'd be pinned down to picking like 5. There's a lot that I will remember for the rest of my life, including the one we're showing today, which is a Chris Hoiles walk-off grand slam back on May 17, 1996, before we probably even called it a walk-off grand slam. I remember where I was. I was in my parents' house growing up, just a young buck, die-hard baseball and Orioles fan. And I was watching on my couch, and this drama unfolding in the bottom of the ninth inning. And what will always resonate about this game against the Mariners, a wild one at that, and we'll get to some of the details of that in a moment. It was what you always dreamt of when you were growing up, dreaming in a wild fantasy that you could be a Major League Baseball player. There were 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth inning. Your team, in this case the Orioles, were down by 3 runs, and it was a full count. The game could go no further. It was over. This was the stopping point unless there was a base hit, base on balls, whatever. But Chris Hoiles brought it to an abrupt end with a walk-off grand slam. If you don't believe me, watch.
3-2 the count. And they'll all be running. Ripken, the possible tying run, of course. And if Hoiles hit one in between them now, Cal might be able to score with this running start. There they go. And the pitch. Swinging a long drive to left center field. It is gone! A grand slam! The Orioles have won it!
Quite a moment at Camden Yards. I know my friends in Orioles production might hold me to this one, but I'm going to guess that's probably all time at Camden Yards one of the 5 most played moments in the history of the Jumbotron. I'm just going to guess top, maybe even 3. It's right up there. A walk-off grand slam to beat the Seattle Mariners by 1, 14-13. The game went 4 hours and 20 minutes, a wild one. Hoiles beats the veteran southpaw, Norm Charlton, a former nasty boy in that. And also in that game, a young Alex Rodriguez hits a grand slam. You know, that Mariners club, who the Orioles faced a year later in the divisional series, Jay Buhner, Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez. Offensively, both of these clubs were powerful, and they were loaded, and they were at their best offensively on this night. The Orioles starting pitcher that night, you may not remember this name, but I do. He was struggling at this point, a young right-hander by the name of Jimmy Haynes. But it was really an Orioles bullpen that struggled that night, and they fell behind, only to have this dramatic come-from-behind victory with a walk-off grand slam by Chris Hoiles. And we caught up with Chris on Orioles Magic, the podcast, talking about that swing.
I think as a kid, we used to do that as well, in the backyards. And, I was actually able to live it in real life and at the Major League Baseball level. And, that was actually a really crazy game. And, I think A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez hit a grand slam earlier in the game that put them on top. And then I was able to come up later on with all that 3-2 count off Norm Charlton and, hit the game winner. The at-bat was actually a good one. Fought off a few pitches and, was able to get to the 3-2 count. And like I said, he hung the split finger, didn't do a whole lot. And I was able to put it in the seats for a game winner.
Yeah, Chris Hoiles, who is such an interesting all-time Oriole. I mean, this is a guy who played 10 years in Baltimore. He only played for the Orioles in the big leagues, came over from Detroit in the late 80s. But he's involved in some of the most important moments in club history. You're talking about the final game at Memorial Stadium, the first game where he was the starting catcher at Camden Yards to catch Rick Sutcliffe's complete game shutout, 21-30 where he hit a home run, 21-31 where he caught Mike Mussina's gem. Mussina's incredible gem in 97, this game in 96. He also hit 2 grand slams in a single game in 98. Jeffrey Mayer, he's the catcher when Mayer reaches over the right field seats and bleachers at Yankee Stadium. Hoiles was kind of the Forrest Gump of Orioles baseball, although he was a really, really good player and a Orioles Hall of Famer, incredibly deserving to be a two-way catcher like that. But that Orioles team in 1996 needed a lot of wins to become the wild card team, eventually faced the Yankees in the ALCS, and that swing by Hoiles was impactful. Now, Hoiles takes deep a left-hander by the name of Norm Charlton, who eventually becomes an Oriole a few years later. But a few years prior, he is in the middle of this incredible brawl against the Mariners at Camden Yards on a Sunday afternoon against Seattle, where Mike Mussina hits Bill Hasselman, and it creates some kind of a lengthy fracas, to say the least. I mean, truly one of the biggest brawls you'll ever see in baseball. And Hoiles, by the way, involved in that one that day, and years later, the famous one against the Yankees. But I asked Hoiles about Norm Charlton, who he takes deep for this walk-off grand slam.
You know, Norm was a very good big league pitcher, very good closer. And, you know, he had a really good split-finger fastball, and everybody knew it. He liked to use it and could throw it for strikes at any time. So, you know, that's what made Norm so tough as a hitter, was you never knew when he was going to throw that splitty. And he actually did it in that at-bat. That's actually what I did hit out, was a split-finger fastball that just kind of hung up in the zone.
By the way, you can join me and Jeff Arnold for this full interview with Chris Hoiles on Orioles Magic, the podcast. Don't miss it. It will drop tomorrow. You can get it at Orioles.com/podcast or wherever podcasts are downloaded. It is a really fun interview with Chris Hoiles. Again, one of my all-time favorite Orioles. Check it out. Orioles Magic, the podcast. This week on Monday, it features Chris Hoiles, and episodes drop Mondays and Fridays, and you can catch up on old episodes. Scott McGregor, Boog Powell, Rick Sutcliffe, you name it. We talked to a lot of Orioles. Chad Bradford, stars, infamous players, guys who have just a great baseball story to tell. So catch up on old episodes of Orioles Magic, the podcast, Mondays and Fridays. And in the middle of the week, we have The Grind, featuring my colleague, Melanie Newman. That is at 11 a.m. on Wednesdays, where Melanie on Orioles Instagram sits down with different Orioles players, and they share a cup of coffee, and they tell good stories and have a lot of good laughs. It's really a fun conversation. The Grind, featuring Melanie Newman on Orioles Instagram. Well, Nurses Week runs through May 12th, and we want to say thank you, MedStar Health nurses. During Nurses Week and every week, every single MedStar Health nurse makes a difference for all of us in our communities, now more than ever. Thank you. Well, thank you for being with us on this edition of Orioles on Deck. Before we send it to a wild Orioles-Mariners game from May of 1996, a game that went 4 hours and 20 minutes and ends with a Chris Hoiles walk-off grand slam. We want to say again, Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I'll say it personally to my beautiful wife, Happy Mother's Day, and also to my mom, Happy Mother's Day. Yeah, we can see a lot of great baseball times together as well over the years. But Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. We don't know where we'd be without you. So thank you. Enjoy the game, everyone.